Good morning. We had an awesome conversation last week talking about the vaccine.
Vaccines.
Yeah. And you know what? With everything else that continues to go on, we're going to continue talking about the vaccine.
Because people seem to want to know about it because it's this massive center point in our lives.
Yeah, it's just kind of, kind of giving us a little challenge, and it's all good, right? So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and talk more in detail about it. Oh, I got two apps open here. Hopefully you guys can still hear me.
I can't hear you, Brenda.
Okay, so you can't hear me. All right, Suzanne, I'm gonna do something here.
And I don't know if it's me or you.
I will be right back.
Just a couple of technical problems, folks. Sorry.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Sorry, little technical difficulty there. So, all right. So we've been both experiencing since the last conversation a lot of discussion and additional questions around the vaccine. But I thought what we could do, and we talked about this, is just kind of share what we're running into and what our professional thoughts are and what we kind of forecast happening moving forward. Suzanne, would you like to kick it off, please?
I would like to I would like to kick it off. How about that? I can speak. Brenda has technical difficulties, but I just start spitting at people. And one of the big things that I am seeing a lot of questions about is religious exemptions. And speaking of, I want to make clear that I'm focusing on the United States. I'm not focusing on any other country's laws. I don't know them. But there was an interesting court case that came up around religious exemptions. And this guy said that for religious reasons, he can't be vaccinated. And his company pushed back. Now, you're allowed to push back a little on religious exemptions to clarify whether it's a sincerely held belief or not. And so they pushed back and said, what's the religious foundation? And he said it's because of fetal cell lines, and that he was Catholic and the use of fetal cell lines prevented him from being vaccinated. So they pushed back with a statement from the Pope saying the vaccine was permissible, and then they pulled out their lists of other medications using the same fetal cell lines that this guy had no objection to, and so showed that it wasn't based on a sincere religious belief. And they won in court. Now, I am not here advocating that you go through digging through everybody's religion and this, but I want you to be aware of that some companies are taking this really strong arm tactic to verify whether or not you have a sincerely held religious belief or you just don't want the vaccine. And so that's something that is out there and people are concerned about it. And there's, people online selling exemptions for, I'll sign as your pastor saying that it's a religious belief. They don't actually need a pastor. That's not actually the law. You can be the only person in the world that has your religious belief, but it's got to be sincere. So if you're planning to use that and you want to say, I don't want anything that were used developing these fetal cell lines, then you got to make sure that you eliminate everything else that was developed using those lines as as well, because businesses are pushing it back.
Yes.
So I thought that was an interesting court case. Not how I would have approached it as the HR manager, but
Well,
that's
how would
it
you
went
approach
down.
it as the HR manager?
I am typically of the belief that if someone says it's my sincere religious belief, and I don't see anything blatantly obvious about it being a lie, that I'm not going to question. Because it's really hard to prove what's in someone's head. I mean, the example that I usually give about how it's when I would push back against someone's sincerely stated religious belief is that if suddenly someone who you've never known to be religious in the slightest says he can't come into work on Saturday because he's suddenly a Seventh-day Adventist, I'd be like, okay, now I want a letter from your pastor, and I want proof of church attendance or whatever, because you've never given the slightest bit of indication. And I know you've gone out and done other non-churchy things on Saturday. That type of thing I would push back on and be suspicious about. But if someone comes back and says, no, it's my sincere belief that, someone gave the example of if someone says my body is a temple, but they're covered in tattoos and smoke. I don't buy that as a proof that they don't have a sincere belief that they shouldn't be vaccinated. So I am a pushover. So if you want to have a fake religious exemption belief, then you want to work for a company where I'm making that decision, because I'm not going to push that. The law does allow pushback, though. That's the thing that I want to be clear. It allows pushback, and it allows more pushback than it does for ADA. If the ADA, the pushback is here, get your doctor to give us the fill out the paperwork. But for religion, it's not a pastor. It's actually questioning your individual beliefs, and I am loath to do that as an individual. I don't think what this company did was wrong. Because they clearly demonstrated that he wasn't sincere in his belief. But also someone could say, yeah, when I got the MMR, I didn't know that it was made with through fetal stem lines. And so now I know, and I wouldn't get it again, but I've already had it. That's absolutely possible. People change their religious beliefs more often than you would think.
Yeah, it's not something you want to take on by yourself. You definitely need guidance from an employment attorney. Go
ahead.
No, because this kind of pushback, you can actually open yourself up and go deeper down the rabbit hole, to be honest with you.
Right. And as I tell people in my COVID webinars, is before you take any negative action towards someone, loop your employment attorney in, because there are those lines, and if you cross them, you are in big trouble.
Yep. You're
big trouble. So loop in your employment.
Absolutely. And you know what? If you are not certain about certain religions, I'm going to give you 2 websites. The first one is religionfacts, facts.com/religions. The next one is humanreligions.info/religions.html. And these 2 websites can actually help you understand a religion better if you've never heard of it, because there's hundreds of them that are out there. Believe it or not, people make stuff up. There's like all sorts of different variations of belief out there, but these 2 websites actually help track that information and will give you the most common ones. When you get into other nations that have indigenous people, that's just not going to be a thing, but most likely. But this is definitely going to help kind of sort out some of the questions that you may have as a result of that.
Yeah, and that's an important thing. And it's also important to always approach religious exemptions with respect.
Yes.
And not with, oh my gosh, you're freaking crazy. Because people have religious beliefs that are different than yours.
Right.
And people can have religious beliefs that are different than the mainstream. And that's okay. The Constitution doesn't protect only people that belong to the following three churches. It is everybody's religious beliefs.
Right.
So anyway, that was an interesting court case. I wouldn't have taken that route. I wouldn't have pushed back, but they did, and they won in court. So my advice to you is, if you're choosing to push back, loop in your employment attorney before you do anything negative.
Absolutely.
Anything at all.
Absolutely. All right. So one of the things that in my circles that I've heard a lot of conversation around is, and you guys have heard me say it, and we both agree, by the way, this one over here and me, we agree on this. We agree that it's going to get challenged. There's no doubt about it. It's going to get challenged in court. So we know that Arizona is, if they haven't filed already, we know they're going to file. Arkansas is planning on filing. There's several other governors that are actually planning on filing as well. Now, I did a little bit of research because I'm a curious little beast. And the big question that I asked the Google, what was it? What is the in the movie The Matrix? The Oracle. There you go.
I don't know. I haven't ever seen Matrix.
What? Oh my gosh, we're going to be talking. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, holy cow, blew my mind. All right. So the question that I asked Google is, can the vaccination be overturned? Can the vaccine be overturned? So I got some interesting perspectives. And one perspective that I received is actually from a director, is a dean of pharmaceutical law. I won't say where it is, but the Constitution of the United States doesn't have any clarification on a particular liberty in this area. However, there is a Supreme Court ruling that goes back to 1905, and we'll talk about this in just a second, that very specifically states that the United States does not, or that citizens cannot deem unconstitutional anything that prevents not affecting other people in the United States. Okay. I know that sounds kind of loose and weird. I don't have the exact language I did earlier, and I accidentally clicked it because I was so prepared. Then I got overexcited. So, so this particular case in 1905 was argued in December 6th of 1904, and it was decided February 20th of 1905. So guess what? The government was just as slow back in the turn of the century as it is today. Good news. But what this case was actually arguing wasn't anything like what we're facing today. It's arguing the ability to protect public health. It was Massachusetts, Jacobson versus Massachusetts. And what it was actually talking about was the smallpox. Now, we don't have the smallpox. That's not what we're up against. But here were some statistics about the smallpox. That, first off, if you don't know what it is, it's a virus that has flu-like symptoms, which patients experience a rash that appears first on the face and the hands and the forearms. They do tend to get infected, by the way, then later appears on the body's, the trunk, the abdomen, or the core. There is no treatment or cure for smallpox, and a vaccine can actually prevent it, but the vaccine side effects risk is too high to justify routine vaccination for people at a low risk of exposure to the virus. Okay. So this was actually, it's a naturally occurring virus that was wiped out worldwide in about the 1980s. And, if you've ever watched a movie about British history, going back to the turn, 1800s, 1700s, early 1900s, you will know that smallpox was something that was absolutely feared because it wiped people out. So on average, 3 out of 10 people who got it died. And it wasn't a quick death. It was a very slow, painful death. And those that actually survived were severely scarred. Okay. It is a highly contagious disease created by the variola virus, which is a member of the orthopox virus. like you needed to know that part. But anyway, it's a little bit of history here. It is an absolute life-threatening disease, and it, created those pus-filled blisters. Okay. That's not what we're dealing with here. Okay. And what we're seeing on the survival rates of COVID are a little bit bigger. Now, they're much stronger. So there are some entities that are actually arguing that there is a Supreme Court standing, which is this one that I found, stating that the government can actually protect people from this type of harm. Okay. But and can act a compulsory vaccination law. So, but this is 1905. And I think what's going to ultimately happen is that this particular court case is going to wind up getting challenged because of the nature of the vaccine. Now,
and I want to add with that particular court case, there's several things that are very different about it than what we're facing now. First of all, it was on a state law.
Yes.
And states have a lot more latitude than does the federal government.
Yes.
So that is one thing. Secondly, they were only fining the person, and they fined him $5, which is approximately $150 in today's amounts. So it was a painful, but not, gonna ruin your complete life and make you homeless kind of a fine. Right. Whereas what we're saying now is you can't work in any company with more than 100 employees if you're not vaccinated. That's a very, very different thing. I think that there's going to be a lot of things to challenge the court thing. I mean, one of the things that that my pal, employment lawyer John Hyman, points out is that these emergency temporary standards are very, very rare. And there's only been 10 of them proposed in the entire history of OSHA, and only 5 have actually been implemented because the other 5 either just never got implemented or were lost in court. So one, they're extremely rare, and 2, this is both overbroad and underbroad. It's overbroad as it doesn't have any exception for people that work at home. And so you can't make a strong argument that you're doing it for the safety of your workplace when the person isn't coming in. And it's underbroad because it says that COVID is this huge threat, but it only applies in companies bigger than 100. And it's not locations bigger than 100, where you could argue that it's the number of people in proximity, it's company size. So if this is so dangerous, I may work in a company of 100, but I'm only in an office with 2 people. How is that different than the people across the street that have 99 people packed into a manufacturing plant? And so his points on those were all of these things together just says it's a craptastic thing. However,
that's Suzanne. That's my favorite word is Suzanne's.
Fantastic is my word choice, not John's. I don't want to put that on John. He did not use that word. And to be clear, just so you know that this is John's legal opinion and not personal opinion, he is 100% pro-vaccine mandate, and he thinks that a vaccine mandate can be done. But he says this one is not how it's going to be able to withstand a court challenge. So I want to make that clear, because people are always saying, oh, well, this is biased information or blah, blah, blah. John is going against his own moral and political beliefs here in pointing out the flaws in this. And so when people are asking me, which they are, do we really have to prepare for this? My answer is maybe.
Okay, I'm gonna continue with some other information here too, and then we'll get into how we think that this is gonna fly. All right. So here's some other information here too that I found very interesting. This was an op-ed that came out of the Washington Post, and if you want to read the full article, you're ready to. It's called "Democracy Dies in Darkness." But this is I think a very interesting piece, and the reason why we're actually talking about this is that you have to be analytical in looking at this and not emotional. And look, that is really challenging. In HR, there's something that you're going to learn. If you haven't been doing this for a long time, if you are doing this, you may not have the words for it. You're going to understand it as soon as you hear it. Not everything in HR is fair. And not only just because it's fair, it doesn't mean that it's legal. And just because it's legal doesn't mean that it's fair. Okay. So this is one of those. Let me say it one more time. There are things in HR that are fair, but just because they're fair doesn't mean that they're legal. And just because things that you do are legal doesn't necessarily mean they're always fair. Got it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So one call out here in this op-ed is that the government does not have the power to require an adult American to do something or put something into his or her body. Now, we do have other case law that has been argued on exactly this. Couldn't tell you what exactly they are, but there is that belief, and then that there is court law that actually could be pulled out for this. In addition to that, it doesn't have the power to order an adult to buy a commercial product, which I found interesting. Is they cited that why Obama's cares or the ACA, the individual mandate, was actually structured as a tax rather than a command. So it's really interesting to see how everybody is looking at this. And, look, when you read something like this or you hear something like this, you don't want to hang on to it like, oh yeah, this is black and white, because we know in this field, nothing is ever black and white. It is always a wide variety of shade of grays. And boy, did we miss out on the marketing, marketing for that. But using that phrase. But you know what?
Let's not use that phrase for any marketing we do, Brenda.
Right, exactly. So what this author is writing is that saying that the mandate is unconstitutional because it would direct or directly coerce a person into taking a drug or a test, both unconstitutional compulsions. So yeah, so then there's the Medicare and Medicaid requirements that are falling short of the doctrines, and there's just so much to this, right? So
there's just so much to this.
Yeah,
I think that we can't emphasize enough how this is not straightforward. And anybody that tells you this is easy, look, here's this court case, there's that court case, there's this experience, there's that experience. It's not straightforward. Yeah. I do want to say I just got a text from one of my employment lawyer friends, and
are they listening?
Maybe. I'll have to check who's in the room. And he says he believes that the OSHA rules are coming out tomorrow.
Oh, good to know.
And then a second employment lawyer friend said, yes, we get definitions for federal contractors for sure.
Oh, good.
So
tomorrow?
So tomorrow is what they are saying. And these people are generally on top of the world. And they tend to be right about this stuff. So even if it doesn't come tomorrow, which it probably will come on a Friday, because this is the kind of stuff they would like us not to be focused on so much. It's coming very, very soon. So tomorrow, keep your eyeballs peeled for federal contractor definitions under this emergency temporary standard, and for OSHA guidelines. And those are going to be two separate things, because it's going to be implemented very differently between your federal contractors and your non-federal contractors. But those things, according to my employment lawyer friends who are brilliant and up to date, are coming out tomorrow. So that's a little breaking news that you heard from here now that may or may not be true, but they have been right in the past.
Well, you bring up something really good. Let's talk about OSHA for a second. So the reason why OSHA has been directed is that their job is to actually create an emergency temporary standard that can stand up to legal challenges. The thing about the temporary emergency standard has never been actually meant to combat law. It's only meant to actually facilitate exactly what it states, a temporary emergency standard. It's never been designed to actually try and help facilitate any type of politicizing or legal wrangling to actually create a brand new standard. So this is going to be very interesting.
Right. And this is something also that I think is, makes it kind of fall flat, that an emergency temporary standard coming out in March of 2020, when this was brand new. Yeah, that makes sense, because there hasn't been any time for Congress to determine blah, blah, blah. In September of 2021, I don't buy that there hasn't been time to go through proper channels by now. So anyway, we'll see what they say. And my bet is that some of the things that we've talked about here, like the no exception for people working at home, will actually appear in the actual OSHA guidelines. I suspect that that will be something that they take into consideration, because I'm not the only person, and John isn't the only person saying this as well, that's a huge hole in this. So I have a feeling that when the actual people that are writing this get this out, that some of those things will change from what was announced over I was gonna say over the pulpit, but I wouldn't really say this is over the pulpit.
Well, like
religious exemptions.
yeah, and
Do we use pulpit outside of church?
Only in England. Only in England. One of the it sounds cooler when you say it that way too, with a British accent. Something to remember that I'm in England in the pulpit. All right. So something to really think about is that understand that if you're in a small business, this is going to inadvertently and disproportionately impact your company from a cost perspective and tracking perspective. And the reason why is that when the administration actually pulled this out, it really is framed to be around larger corporations and larger businesses with a bigger population. And so it's likely that we're going to wind up seeing, some carve outs for smaller businesses, but it's hard to say until we actually see the rules.
It's going to be interesting to see them. I'm really hoping that they're correct and that they come out tomorrow, because we were looking at an implementation date for the federal contractors of November 22nd, which you may say, oh, that's far off, but it is not far off, especially since people are expected to be vaccinated, and that means fully vaccinated with 2 doses by November 22nd. So you need some time to fight that before people have to go and get their first shot at the end of October. So this is, we can use every minute that we can get, and I'll lay my cards on the table. I'm opposed to federally mandated vaccine, mandatory vaccines. I'm opposed to it. I am vaccinated myself, but I am opposed to a federal mandate. So I'm on team no mandate, but my information that I deliver to you is based on laws and what's going on in the world, and not my personal opinion, but I just want to play my cards up front.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We are going to go ahead